We've come to a point where our human condition, the zeitgeist, is driven by the fact that there's a consensus not to have a consensus about anything that's going on. That, in effect, the pendulum of humanity is not the movement between conservative and liberal. In my country, we don't have Republicans and Democrats, we have Remocrats and Dupublicans, which is a very funny line. The pendulum of humanity is the move towards consensus or the move towards the endpoints. It's more like this motion. And we're heading towards the endpoints without any institutional guidance as to where we should stop. At the same time, and it's both at the same time, and the one end has, extreme fundamentalism, and let's say abstinence, and at the other end you have Ozzy Osbourne as the poster child for fatherhood. I mean, how do we get to that? And so we have literally, as a context, gotten to the point where what we really have the most is an abolition of context. There are no agreed-upon social norms. We have no social norms, and there's a crisis of confidence in both institutions and in authority. If it was 1960, and I asked everybody in this room to identify who was the best rocket scientist in the world, everyone who would have made an answer, because some people wouldn't know, but anyone who answered would have said Wernher von Braun. If I asked you who is the number one rocket scientist in the world today, who would you say? I don't think anyone would know a name to even put there, although maybe some of us would. And so we have gotten to a point where if you think about reality, and take a good look at that picture, if you think about reality, there is no longer one reality because everybody can make their own. That was the real message of the Unabomber. He made his own reality. Actually, the real message of the Unabomber was that going to Harvard is no longer a guarantee. But thank you very much over here for that. And we've hit the point where we're living in a world that has become autocatalytic. Change has become autocatalytic. It's not about the rate of change or the amount of change. Change is feeding itself. It's kind of like the weather at Mount Everest. You can't predict the weather at Mount Everest because it makes it in real time, moment to moment to moment. It's the same kind of thing. And you must, as much as it would probably make John Locke roll over in his grave, give up on logic. Not that it doesn't exist anymore, but it's no longer the dominant organizing premise to society. And if you think about this for you, it made me think of the role of the outlaw and what James Joyce wrote, the great Irish writer of Ulysses, considered perhaps, actually he was recently named as the greatest writer of all time, with Mark Twain or Samuel Clemens being only second, that civilization may be said indeed to be the creation of its outlaws. Do you have a different relationship going forward with the outlaw than perhaps you had recently? And you must recognize today that authority is not a thing. Authority is a process. It's an interpretive process to which we seek the solidity of a thing. That it's not carte blanche anymore, that authority is your mandate just as a result of what you do for a living. You have to have that be redefined as we go forth into this new world. So if we look at some of the drivers, and you've heard about these, and so in some ways it's a wonderful piece of opportunity for me to give converging validity at the same time as I hope I provide some new thought. Let's look at that, what I call the 20-year window. Of course, we're now looking at a 13 of that, but to me it was all pretty much the same. And you've seen at least parts of these building blocks. These are the 6 things that I like to study, and I'm sure you Sahil likes to study as well. But the social agenda, governance models, can policy keep up with the way we're changing? Should policing be helping more in this construction of the laws than it is just enforcing them as it goes forth? The social agenda now being driven so much by naive knowledge. I'd encourage you to think about the concept of naive knowledge sources, people who are untrained experts, like Grandma Moses was an untrained painter. On my biography, it actually says that I'm the Time Magazine 2007 Person of the Year. But so are you, Chief, Commissioner, and so is everybody in this room. And that's the point. The 2007 Person of the Year is you. Every single one of you in this room. What's going on in the arts? Something that is oftentimes overlooked, because we do draw our dominant metaphors around the predominant drivers of arts and sciences. So what's the dominant science as we go forth? How is value being identified and wealth being created? What's the driving economic model as we go forth? That will have a lot to do with determining where future crime will reside. And obviously, as we've seen earlier, what's going on in technology. So as we take those and we look at a world after an abolitionist context, it's appropriate to reference that there's always a dominant organizing premise to society. Yesterday we looked at the agricultural and the industrial and the digital. There was actually one that went before, which was hunter-gatherer. And I'm, as I've said earlier, posited that there's now the fifth great epoch in the 4 million to 5 million years of human prehistory and history, going all the way back to Lucy, the little bipedal hominid discovered by Don Johanson at the Institute of Human Origins. I used to debate with Don what was the single greatest moment in humanity, and of course he said that it was discovered or it was created, and I said, well, then what's the second greatest? And I eventually convinced him that the second greatest issue in humanity is that we collect things.